Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is John Barbour, TV producer, including Real People, the first reality show on television. He's a humorist. He wrote jokes for Frank Sinatra. He's author of the book, Your Mother is Not a Virgin, Life and Times of a Canadian Dropout That Changed the Face of American Television. He's also a 5-time Emmy Award winner. Nobody's done that in both the entertainment and news category. John, welcome back to the show.
Oh, Jim, it's a delight to be talking to you again, and I loved visiting with you when I was up there in Vancouver a couple of months ago doing a book tour from Vancouver to Toronto, and I hope probably to see you again in February. I may be coming back because a publicist I hired in Toronto is setting up a lot of book signings at Indigo Books. I guess Indigo is Canada's version of Barnes & Noble, and the book is doing very well on Canada's Amazon, I'm glad to say, thanks to you and others. So I'm looking forward to seeing you again and looking forward to talking to you today.
Now, John, of course, you're not just in the entertainment business. As we said, you won Emmy Awards as well for news coverage, and that means there's a serious side to it. And what could be more serious, I guess, for people in the U.S. right now than the impeachment hearings?
Well, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I had one of my Facebook friends describe it as politics Jerry Springer show, which I think is really quite accurate. And yesterday, while all of this was going on early in the morning, I got up and I want to just let you know something that I wrote on Facebook. I posted on Facebook and just got hundreds and hundreds of responses almost immediately. And Jim, I said, if Democrats and Republicans are going to move ahead with this noisy, distracting nonsense of impeaching Trump, I'd wish they do so without shouting out the biggest lie in America. And that lie is, no one is above the law in America. Any idiot who has seen our recent history over the past 60 years knows that's the biggest load of crap since we were told as kids that there was a Santa Claus. The two Bushes and their cohorts, war criminals who lied about Iran and Iraq, were above the law. LBJ and McNamara et al., who lied us into Vietnam, were above the law. The scores of still unprosecuted bankers and Wall Streeters who illegally profited by creating the devastating 2008 recession, then got bailed out, Jim, were above the law. When Clay Shaw lied under oath he was not CIA, and Helms and others at CIA who rejected Jim Garrison's constitutionally legal subpoenas to appear in court, they were above the law. For politicians and media pundits to say otherwise is a Mount Rushmore of bullshit. In America, Jim, those in the position of making the laws and the ones in the position of breaking the laws. I put it up at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 10 o'clock there were hundreds of hits on that. And America is seriously divided. And there is a little-known fact, a very little-known fact about the impeachment of Trump yesterday, and that was that Donald Trump was impeached the very same day he approved a bill for the state of Florida to finally go to Canada to import less expensive important drugs into the state of Florida. And as Gomer Pyle used to say, surprise, surprise, surprise. So I think that the Democrats had inadvertently given Donald Trump a landslide next November into the White House. And I am not a Trump fan, but I am definitely a fan of truth. And Donald Trump, while he has a very unpleasant personality, he certainly isn't as charming or as witty or as attractive as John Kennedy was. And there's no question about that. He is being impeached because he is not liked more than anything else. Look at Bill Clinton. Murdered 87 women and children at Waco. Bill Clinton had an affair. And Bill Clinton signed the Communications Act that took the free press out of America's hands and put them in the hands of 6 corporations. That's impeachment. He was never impeached. George Bush Sr. committed treason when he was the head of the CIA because Jimmy Carter had gotten the hostages freed from Iran when they took over the American embassy. And George Bush convinced the Iranians to not release the hostages until after Reagan became president. And that they would make a better deal. It was called in this country Iran-Contra. And afterwards, George Bush told a reporter, if people really knew what we were up to in this country, they'd chase us down the street and hang us. Now, there's grounds for impeachment there when he became president of the United States. And, of course, Lyndon Johnson, who lied us into Vietnam with the fake Gulf of Tonkin resolution. So, Donald Trump phone call to the Ukraine was more dirty politics than it wasn't treason or high misdemeanors or high crimes or whatever you call it. Now, let's say he's calling Ukrainian president and he's saying, hey, I understand that there's a major corporation over there that you guys are investigating because there might be corruption there and they're paying off Ukrainian officials to get a deal in your country. Could you look into it? Now, it so happens that Joe Biden's son happens to be one of the guys making the deal for that company in Ukraine. It doesn't mean necessarily that Trump wants to sabotage Biden as a president of the United States. Maybe he's helping the president of the Ukraine clear up a lot of criminality in the Ukraine. And that is not a high crime or a misdemeanor. So I think they have stumbled badly, and I'll tell you why. Those people who love Trump, which is about half the country, love him. But on the Democrat side, they are so splintered with their 8 potential candidates that there is nobody on the Democratic side, even if they pick somebody they love, they won't pick somebody that 50% of the country will love. So Donald Trump is also not going to be convicted in the Senate. You know, as a comic, it's funny. I had somebody once say to me, what on earth is a comic doing talking about the assassination of President John Kennedy and making these 2 definitive films about the murder of John Kennedy and the birth of fake news? And I always tell them, well, it seems to me that it's the best possible person at all to be telling the story of that, because the Warren Commission is the biggest joke ever perpetrated on the American people. But they have, what I did this morning is something, again, that has gotten unbelievable response. Now, I know you're a fan of films. Do you remember Dr. Strangelove with Peter Sellers? Do you remember that, Stanley Kubrick's magnificent film?
Yeah, about the end of the world, because everybody had mutual assured destruction. Their B-52 scene was the best, where he rode the bomb down.
It was an absolute masterpiece. Well, this morning, I was daydreaming about this, And I said, Jim, if Stanley Kubrick and Peter Sellers of the genius Dr. Strangelove fame are in heaven, and they're looking down at what I told you one of my friends called the political Jerry Springer show, I find myself, Jim, imagining the movie plot they are happily writing. And this is the plot. Donald Trump gives Pence $10 million. Trump is found guilty by the Senate and thanks them. Pence then announces Trump is hired as his main political advisor. Pence then signs an executive order reversing Clinton's Communications Act, taking the media out of the hands of 5 corporations with no one allowed to own more than 5 TV or radio stations or newspapers, as during JFK's presidency. Pence signs another executive order, Jim, blowing the CIA into the 1,000 pieces, as JFK once said, and all of a sudden, all of the JFK files are released. The next scene is hundreds of politicians, bankers, generals, and media stars scramble to flee the country, even to Russia. Pelosi and the Democrats scramble now to impeach Pence. And the movie ends, Jim, with Putin getting out of a limousine at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He smiles as he looks up at the sign above the White House, and guess what that sign says, Jim? It says, Trump Tower, Theta. You can't get any better than that. I mean, American politics has turned into really sick comedy. And if you're not laughing at it, you just don't understand what's going on. So as I said before, I started to say, from the time I started as a comic, and I must add, the first thing I'll say is, when I started as a comic, I predicted, ever since I got into this country legally, every presidential election since I got into this country, whether I voted for them or not, I predicted them. Because as a comic, when you're up on stage in front of the public and you're telling jokes, and you make a joke about, let's say, a Republican, and it gets a bigger laugh than the joke about the Democrat, you know the Democrat's going to win, and vice versa. I have never been wrong, and I predict now, even though I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm just a truth supporter, and I don't intend to vote in the next election for 2 reasons. First of all, when I asked Jim Garrison if he ever thought the president ran the country, Jim Garrison said I did until they murdered John Kennedy. And no president has run the country since John Kennedy, and one of the reasons that Trump is having so much trouble is he is discovering that he does not run the country either. And people in this country always complain, well, I voted for Trump because it wasn't Hillary Clinton, so they say they voted for the lesser of 2 evils. Why vote for any evil, lesser or not? So I'm not going to be voting at all. And the other thing about this is that it's monumentally discouraging to me, because, you know, this is the country that I fought for years to get into after being deported twice. And I succeeded at it. And one of the reasons I released the Garrison Files and made these films, it was my Christmas card, a thank you card to the country that gave me a great life, a great career, and a great family. But I predict that Donald Trump is going to get a landslide victory next November. And he will be acquitted in the Senate at the end of January.
Are there any Democratic candidates that impress you or you think might have a chance against Trump?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. And I must say, 3 months ago, there was one I really, really liked a lot. And that was Tulsi Gabbard. And the reason I liked her was twofold. First of all, after 9/11, she joined the service to fight the terrorists when Donald Trump and others have never volunteered to serve in the military. But more important than that, this 3 months ago, she said, the first thing I'm going to do if I'm elected president of the United States is drop all charges against Julian Assange and then all charges against Ed Snowden and let him come back to the country in which he was born. Otherwise, what good is our First Amendment? I would vote for any president, regardless if they were independent or Democrat or Republican, who voted to give America a free press once again, which we do not have. Because at the beginning of the movie, American Media and the Second Assassination of President John Kennedy, you have Thomas Jefferson saying, you cannot have a functioning democracy unless you have an informed electorate. And an informed electorate means the most important thing in a democracy is a free press. We do not have that. And also at the top is John Kennedy saying, we need a free flow of information in this country. And any government that prevents it is a government afraid of the people. And also there's a quote from Mark Twain, over 100 years old. That's one of the first fake wars, which was a Spanish-American war in which we murdered hundreds of thousands in the Philippines, for crying out loud, is Mark Twain said, if you do not read America's newspapers, you're uninformed. If you do, you're misinformed. Then he went on to say, in America, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. And we have been fooled since November 22nd, 1963. But other than that, I find no one, everyone that I supported. God, that was a good question, Jim. When I got eligible to vote, for crying out loud, the ones I voted for all were the anti-war candidates, or all the ones I supported financially, were all potential anti-war candidates, and they all turned out to be turncoats or cowards. I mean, I voted for Obama for a number of reasons. First of all, he was the first black, and I thought, oh my, how terrific. This guy has a lot of wrongs that he can make right as president of the United States. And he caved in immediately to the military-industrial complex, and that in months was sending drones over to Africa to kill innocent civilians who were Americans. One was a 16-year-old boy. And I would suggest, and what I did immediately, that was 3 months afterwards, after I voted for him, I wrote a savage satirical song called the Obama Blues. And if you go to YouTube and you Google John Barbour's Obama Blues, you can see it. And I must tell you, it's hilarious, and it's savage, and it's truthful. The same thing with John Kerry. John Kerry had hired 21 lawyers, and there was no question that there was fraud in Florida for the vote. And he said, I'd hired the lawyers because I was going to challenge the vote. And the day after the election, he fired the lawyers and never challenged them. I also financially supported Bernie Sanders because he was the only one who was openly opposed against these fake wars. He was for a health plan similar to Canada's health plan. He was against student loans. Student loans were usurious, and all of that should be changed. The only one who talked about the issues. And then he lost and moved, folded his tent and moved into Hillary Clinton's tent. And then I wrote a savage satire about him, because the worst thing you can do as a politician is not destroy democracy. You destroy hope, because if people have hope, they have a hope that once again a democracy can be restored to this country. And right now, we do not have one. It's obvious that we don't have one. I don't know how well they're doing in Canada. And the same with Ron Paul. Ron Paul had a great slogan. He said, the only one Thomas Jefferson would vote for. Wonderful slogan. The first time in my life, I put a bumper sticker on my car. The only one that Thomas Jefferson would vote for. And then I was hoping, when he didn't get the Republican nomination, that he would run as a third-party candidate, that he would walk his constitutional talk. Instead, he ran off to make some money. And again, I was heartbroken. That's happened to everyone that I have supported or voted for who spoke up against fake wars. There is no one now that I see in this country that I could vote for. And when I was a kid, in the 50s and even in the 60s, Jim, I could name 100 people in American politics and in American literature, on American television or radio, who were either Republican or Democrat or independent, who were brilliant and articulate and people you would want to be around and talk to privately. I can't think of anyone in public life now that I admire.
We'll have more with John Barbour right after the break.
Cyprus Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cyprus Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cyprusdevelopmentcorp.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Barbour. John, the Golden Globe nominations did not include one U.S. network television show this time around. Does that tell us what the state of network TV is? And is it going to die?
Well, yes, network television is disappearing rapidly. You know, when I got into television, Jim, we got real people on the air. There were only 3 networks. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS, and then Fox was an aspiring network. And Real People was the highest rated show in the history of television. We used to get half of everybody who was watching television. Now any network is lucky and thrilled if they get 2 or 3% of the populace anymore. Network television is going to go the way of vaudeville. They're going to disappear. And what is going to happen is the internet is going to grow and grow and grow. And then outfits like Netflix and Disney is now doing what Netflix is doing. I mean, Netflix spent $130 million to make The Irishman. And, if folks are interested at all, and my son, as you know, up until last year was the co-executive producer and one of the writers on Criminal Minds. And because it was their last year, they asked him to write the 2-hour finale show, which will air later. But he and his partner are going to Spain next month for 5 months to begin location shooting and then filming of a 10-part series for Netflix. But this $130 million that Netflix spent on The Irishman, just imagine, you could have made at one time 30 years ago 130 movies for $1 million each. And I have refused to see The Irishman. And if anybody is interested in why I refuse to see The Irishman, you can Google on YouTube John Barbour's comments on The Irishman. And the main reason that I refuse to see The Irishman is because it propagates a myth. And that myth, and you know, I must tell you, Marty Scorsese makes great movies, especially gangster movies. I mean, Casino and Goodfellas are absolutely classics of that genre, and they're almost comparable. The best gangster movie ever made in history, of course, was Francis Coppola's The Godfather. The Godfather was so well done, Jim. It had us rooting for killers and gangsters. And we didn't mind rooting for killers and gangsters because they were going around killing other killers and gangsters, okay? But imagine if The Godfather had propagated the myth that the mafia killed John Kennedy. I would have second thoughts about saying that that was an excellent film. That's why I had refused to see The Irishman. Now, maybe The Irishman is shot magnificently, and acted well and written well. But why would I want to compliment a movie that perpetuates the myth of the mob murdering John Kennedy? So let me tell you a couple of facts about the murder of John Kennedy. And these are little-known facts. When I interviewed Jim Garrison on September 5th, 1981, at one point he'd asked me to turn off the cameras. He wanted to talk to me off the record. And what he was saying off the record was, let me ask you, Jim, did you ever see the movie Executive Action?
Yes.
Okay. You remember at the very beginning of the film, they're talking about the fact that, and it looks like it's a major politician is telling the CIA, you're going to have 2 years of John Kennedy, 2 terms of John Kennedy, 2 terms of Robert Kennedy, and then 2 terms of Teddy Kennedy, and so that's 12 years of Kennedys, and we can't have that. So you got to get rid of the first one, okay? And Garrison said the CIA and the agencies in the Pentagon were not the ones who initiated the murder of John Kennedy. It came from the leading families who own the government, and they hired the politicians, and they hired the Allen Dulleses to head the CIA. And he said one of those families was the Harriman family. And he said, I believe the person assigned to tell Allen Dulles to go ahead to engineer the murder of John Kennedy was Averell Harriman. Averell Harriman was 71 years of age. He was a billionaire heir to the Union Pacific fortune. At one point, he was on the board of directors of 54 of America's leading corporations. He was hired as a political advisor by John Kennedy, even though Harriman hated Kennedy. And he hated Kennedy more because Kennedy kept saying no to Harriman's wanting to send more advisors into Vietnam the way Eisenhower had. And in August of 1963, there is a cable. Cable number is 243. You can Google it on Wikipedia. In this cable, he orders Henry Cabot Lodge and the CIA to get rid of Diem, who was the president of South Vietnam, the peace president that John Kennedy supported. Robert Kennedy heard about this and had a screaming argument with Harriman. Harriman then went public and said both of the Kennedys were insane. Diem was murdered the first week in November. John Kennedy was murdered the third week in November. And then the war was on. So that's what happened. Now, for Marty Scorsese to say the mafia and gangsters did it is a misleading myth because Harriman was not a gangster. He was a one-percenter. Allen Dulles was not a gangster. And Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, who were assigned by CBS to destroy Jim Garrison along with Mike Wallace, were media giants. They were not gangsters. Do you know what happened to gangsters? Give you an example, 2 of them. Sam Giancana was called to testify before the House Select Committee. His house is guarded by police so that he can make it to Washington. And his best friend shoots him in the back of the head while he's cooking lasagna and shoots him 6 times in the mouth as a warning not to talk, and the cops never find the killer. And then the other gangster, John Rosselli, who had testified before the House Select Committee, months later, his dismembered body is found in a drum floating in Biscayne Bay off the coast of Florida. So that's what's happened to gangsters, and that's why I never reviewed The Irishman. And I think it is just appalling that myth continues. And anybody who is interested in finding the absolute truth about the murder of John Kennedy, just go to Amazon for $2. You can get The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. But let's get back to the business of show business, which you brought up. It's changing entirely. Do you know that the best, what is the best film or documentary that you've ever seen, Jim, about somebody in show business?
I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what the second best was. And it was the best until 5 years ago. The second best was Ernie Kovacs, television's original genius. See, Ernie Kovacs was the Charlie Chaplin of television. And he was one of the first people in America to sue for a divorce and get custody of the children. And even though he had the #1 show on television, his ex-wife kidnapped the children. So while he's trying to entertain Americans, he's trying to hunt to find his 2 children. It's a phenomenal documentary. I did it for Edie Adams, who was the widow, the penniless widow, and it helped turn her into a millionaire. And that was you can see it for nothing on my site. Go to johnbarbersworld.com. You can see it for nothing. It's fabulous. But it was the best documentary until a European kid, and I mention this because this is the future of the visual arts for the rest of the world, because of what I hold in my hand, which is my phone. This kid, in his 30s, inherited a little money, and he started to travel around the world so he could find a story to tell. He wanted to do something with his life, and he loved movies, and he thought he would find a story to tell, and he would tell that story. And he couldn't find anything. And he was in South Africa 5 years ago. And everywhere he went, he heard this song sung by a Hispanic American by the name of Rodriguez. And he, wherever he went hearing the song, and he asked a music producer once, "What is that song I keep hearing in restaurants and shops?" And the guy said, "You guys had 'We Shall Overcome' from Dr. Martin Luther King. This is our anthem to fight apartheid." And this guy, Rodriguez, sells more albums in South Africa than the Beatles. Now, he had never heard of this Rodriguez guy. Rodriguez recorded this song about Sugarman. Sugarman is a term to describe dope dealers in the 60s. And he was a young man of the 20s when he was 60 years of age. He was in his 20s in the 60s. He recorded the song 2 or 3 times, and his career failed. And so he got into the construction business, and that's where he became a laborer the rest of his life. Anyway, this guy heard that he lived in New Jersey and had 2 daughters. And he called the daughters and said, "Could I come and visit?" And they thought it was a joke. He showed up, and he said to them, "Listen, if I pay for your father's way and your way," the guy's 71 years of age now, and he says, "If I pay your way to South Africa, will you please come to South Africa with me?" And they said, "Yes, and if you got to pay for the daughters too." He goes back to Africa. He finds a music producer, says he's located Rodriguez, who's 71. Could they set up a concert? And the guy said, absolutely. He goes back to New Jersey and flies first class with him to Johannesburg, South Africa. 25,000 people meet Rodriguez at the airport. Not only does he do one concert for 20,000 people, he does 12 concerts. And from that point on, he went around the world. A friend of mine, Lano Senek, in Vancouver, who does Black Op Radio, paid $150 to see him 3 years ago in Vancouver. Now, this kid, Jim, shot the first 70 minutes of his documentary on his phone. He didn't need a camera. Now, you can go and make unbelievable videos and short videos or whatever on your phone. You can go out and buy a camera for $200 or $300 that is as good as any camera that Cinemax or anybody else has. So what is going to happen is you're going to have a lot of independent filmmakers who are not seeing what they need to see. It's impossible now to watch network television. There is absolutely nothing meaningful, and that almost includes PBS. And so what you have to do is you have to search the internet. Now, I've always said about the internet, the sad finale to this story about this kid in Europe. His film, Searching for Sugar Man. I urge you to see it. The best film ever. Won an Academy Award 5 years ago, and then the kid who made it committed suicide, sadly. Never left a note, so we don't even know why he did that. But what is going to happen is you search the internet, and the internet to me is like a box of Cracker Jack. It's full of nuts and it's full of corn. But once in a while you go through there and you will find like prize at the bottom of the box, and there are dozens of them on the right and on the left that are worth watching and worth listening to, and some making unbelievable documentaries that must be seen. So there you go. That is the future of show business. The problem with show business, Jim, is it became more business and less show. And people cannot I don't know how anybody can function without being creative. And there are people out there who are thinking, God, I can do that as well as anybody, and they go out and do it. You ever heard of a guy named James Corbett, a Canadian?
I interview James Corbett on a frequent basis.
Well, there you go. James Corbett, as you know, born in Canada, I believe, Calgary.
Yes.
And he went to Japan as a teacher, and he was teaching English to Japanese students. And he was always upset because there was something fishy about 911. And so, 10 years or so ago, he thought the only way he could get it out of his system, Jim, was to do a rant. So he did the research and realized this is a crock. The government's position doesn't hold water. It's full of holes. And this rant is seen by 500,000 people. And he thought, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And good for you for interviewing him, because he does a wonderful job and lives in Japan.
And he still supports the Calgary Stampeders and the Calgary Flames.
Well, good for him. And he did say something really brilliant about 911. He said there will never be any prosecutions for 911 because there is no district attorney in New York who comes close to being a Jim Garrison. And after seeing that, I had him on my show also. But I haven't done my show for a year now because I've been traveling around trying to sell my book. And thanks to you, I sold a few books while I was in Vancouver.
We'll have more with John Barbour right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Barbour. John, a number of actors and actresses are a little bit up in arms here. The first one, I want to talk about Adam Driver, who's in the latest Star Wars movie. He was also in the HBO series Girls. Apparently, he doesn't like to hear or watch clips of himself performing. And when he was on National Public Radio, he walked out of an interview and they played a clip of him. Is it right for them to walk out if they have a phobia, or should you just get used to hearing and seeing yourself?
Well, I haven't the foggiest idea about that, and I don't know who would bother to go see another Star Wars movie anyway, but, one of the greatest, potentially the greatest English-speaking actor who ever lived, Richard Burton, he was until he married Liz Taylor and became a rich celebrity, but I saw him when I was in England 2 or 3 times, and I never saw anyone more powerful, more magnificent on a stage or in a movie than Richard Burton. But Burton could never watch himself on the screen, and so would never watch him. Now, why this kid walked out? I mean, he's not Greta Garbo, for God's sake. Nobody knows who he is, and nobody cares who he is. Or maybe even like the fact that he was seeing that he chose to do a script that was lousy, and he couldn't stand listening to himself. That's all nonsense. It's just meaningless nonsense. I was a film critic for Los Angeles Magazine for 10 years, and I was 5 years at KNBC. I was the first one in America to review movies on the news. And 2 of my very best friends became two of the people I hammered the most. And one was Neil Simon. Remember the movie The Sunshine Boys?
Yes.
Okay. The Sunshine Boys, I panned terribly as a film. And I panned it because Walter Matthau made his only bad performance. George Burns, whom I absolutely loved in everything except that, was totally miscast. And I told the audience that if Shakespeare got royalties, he still would not be as wealthy as Neil Simon, the wealthiest playwright in history, who's written The Odd Couple, The Sunshine Boys, Plaza Suite, just phenomenal plays. And I said, in New York City, the Sunshine Boys is about two Jewish comedians. And it is so brilliantly written and performed that even if you're Catholic or Muslim or an atheist, you're going to love it because these are two human beings that you can identify with. And they're two comics who hate each other but get together after 30 years to see if they can make a comeback. They were played by Jack Albertson and Sam Levine. And on the air, I said that Neil Simon, as the wealthiest playwright in the world, does not need 20th Century Fox or any studio to finance his plays. He could do it himself. So the first thing that Neil Simon should do next time he writes something is a letter firing himself as a casting director. I get back into my office and the phone rings, and guess who it is? It's Neil Simon. And he's laughing. He just absolutely loved it. And he said, I'm on my way to the Beverly Hilton Hotel. They're going to give me the Star of Israel award. Would you come down and MC it for me? And I did, and that's how we became friends. And the same thing happened with Burt Reynolds. As a matter of fact, a Canadian company is now making what they say is a definitive documentary about Burt Reynolds. And they contacted me because they have the Burt Reynolds interviews that he did with Johnny Carson, the Burt Reynolds interviews he did with Mike Douglas and with Merv Griffin. And then they came across the 18-minute interview I did on a local show with him when I had a local show in Los Angeles. And they said it's the best he ever was, and they wanted to buy minutes from that to use in the documentary, and I gave them the right to do that at $2,000 a minute, and they could have only up to 4 minutes. So that's in production as we speak. The reason that interview came about is because I saw White Lightning. And I said, that at the time, Burt Reynolds was the highest paid actor in the world. And I said, Burt, being this popular and engaging and really a good actor, has his choice of the diamonds of every script in Hollywood. But he keeps choosing zircons like White Lightning. And I must tell you, lightning did not strike. I get off the phone and he calls me and he said, have you got room for another guest on Saturday night? I was doing a Saturday night show on NBC locally called the 19-Inch Variety Show. And he came on. You Google John Barbour interviews Burt Reynolds. You will see unbelievable how funny this guy is, how bright he is, and how he confronts me humorously as a critic. I mean, it is totally brilliant. And with Neil Simon, when I did my second comedy album based on my reviews called I Met a Man I Didn't Like, Neil Simon did the liner notes, as did Burt Reynolds. And when I got Real People on the air quite accidentally, I decided I can't do this anymore. I can't be a critic anymore. The first two people to call me were Burt Reynolds and Neil Simon, and both of them, John, you cannot stop doing what you're doing because who's going to tell the movie emperors that they're wearing no clothes? And I said to both of them, I said, I just ran out of inventive, imaginative, funny ways to say it's a piece of shit. And they are. Movies are like people. 99% of them are crap. But one will come along that makes up for those other 99. The same way with human beings and the same way with movies, and most are. And it's getting tougher in America now to find anything really inspiring. to find a person that's even inspiring anymore. It's really tough.
John, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Well, I love being here, Jim. I hope we do it again after the first of the year.
Oh, certainly. Well, the day you run out of stories is the day I get out of show business.
Well, listen, you have a happy holiday. Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and I hope to see you in February when I'm back in Vancouver. The most beautiful city in North America, by the way.
Yeah, I think we only placed third in the world, but we're okay with that. We're Canadian. A bronze medal's terrific.
Well, wait a minute. Who beat out Vancouver?
I think Cape Town, South Africa, and maybe Salzburg in Austria, where they did Sound of Music.
Oh, my God. They don't even come close, for crying out loud. I mean, Vancouver is by far the most beautiful city, not only in North America, but in the entire world. Its climate is perfect. Its geography is perfect. You know what? It is the G spot of cities. There you go.
Go to the bottom of the V for Vancouver and you'll find the G. Thank you so much, John. And best of the season to you and your family. My guest has been John Barbour, television producer, including Real People. He's a humorist. He wrote jokes for Frank Sinatra, and he's the author of the book, Your Mother Is Not a Virgin. His website, johnbarbersworld.com. He was speaking to us from Las Vegas. If you have any questions for John or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Questions are really welcome, and we do answer them. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @TalkDigitalNet. I'm Jim Goddard. Best of the season.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.